To be or not to be interested in Shakespeare? That's the question facing today's teenagers. Well, on this edition of Resource Review, we're looking at 3 teaching resources that might just fire their enthusiasm. They are a DVD of silent Shakespearean plays, a series of interactive teachers' packs, and a collection of online resources. Recommending today's resources, we have Angela Rideout, who is the Secondary National Strategy Consultant for Hounslow Local Authority. On the panel today is Dr. Melanie Pope, Assistant Professor in English Education at the University of Warwick, and Colin Hinson, a freelance education consultant and author. And we have our very own strolling player, Matthew Tosh, who we've sent into schools to see the resources in use. Well, Angela, let's talk about your first choice of resource for us today, and it's a DVD called Silent Shakespeare from the British Film Institute. What's on it and why do you like it?
OK, I like it because it's a fantastic compilation of early cinematic versions of Shakespeare's plays. So you have King John, The Tempest, Midsummer Night's Dream, Richard III. A whole load. And because they are early 20th century versions, they are silent. And I think because they're excerpts, you can use them with a range of key stages and across the ability range.
So this is something that a teacher would be using in the classroom with their pupils?
Absolutely. Wealth of opportunity available to compare extracts but also focus on particular plays.
OK. Well, now let's go over to someone who's rarely silent, Matthew Tosh. He visited Karen Bird and her Year 10 class at King's Langley Secondary School in Hertfordshire to see what they think of silent Shakespeare.
According to Mr. Shakespeare in Much Ado About Nothing, silence is the perfectest herald of joy. Well, let's see if the Silent Shakespeare DVD can indeed bring joy to Karen Bird's Year 10 class.
So we're going to watch the film first, then I'm going to pick out particular characters for you to look at, and you're going to write and tell me what you think those characters are like.
The Silent Shakespeare DVD is not really designed as an education resource, so how have you been using it today?
I used it really to look at the way that characters are created. We looked at the fact that there wasn't any language used, and then we took away the fact that we've got pictures and we worked on creating the language that is used to create a character. See if you can work out who the characters are. We heard Helena, Demetrius, Lysander. We looked at the film itself first and we picked on 2 of the characters. I asked them to look particularly at Bottom and Puck. And then what we did when the film had finished was we brainstormed a few words that described those characters. And from those simple words that they'd written down, I asked them to expand their characters and write their own character creatively.
What sort of character traits have they got?
Naughty. He was always smiling, so happy.
OK. Did you find you could pick up on that, though? Because there was no talking in there. How did you...
Facial expressions.
Facial expressions. So how's that gone down with the children?
They seemed to really enjoy it. I was quite surprised. I think a couple of them said it was boring because it was black and white and there was no sound. But I think most of them picked up on the fact that at the time it was fantastic technology that was being used and they appreciated it for what it was.
Do you see any cross-curricular links with this resource?
I do. I think it would be very useful for media. I mean, obviously, to see the vast differences now in filming and from Victorian times. Also for drama, it can be used as a springboard for all sorts of things. History would be very useful so they can actually see how the Victorians thought about certain things. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting for lots of different subjects to use.
So if I asked you to summarise this in a sentence?
It was lovely to use. It was simple, it was versatile, and I really enjoyed using it. Fab.
Thank you, Karen. Well, from me, the rest is silence. So let's go back to the studio.
Well, Melanie, let's come to you. What do you think of Silent Shakespeare?
I think this is an absolutely fabulous resource. I loved it. I can see so many applications for this in the classroom, from the Year 7 pupils who are maybe just getting an early experience of Shakespeare and just getting experience of the plot and the action, because Shakespeare was about theatre. He wasn't about writing and sitting down and reading text. He was about theatre and action, and it gives a sense of that. But I think it also gives the more critical readers right up to A-level the opportunity to really interrogate these as text in their own right and to relate them back to the original text.
Colin, would you agree?
Yeah, I have to. I mean, it was a fantastic... I had to watch it twice. The first time I watched this, I just got lost in it myself and I just enjoyed it, you know, from beginning to end. And I thought, I've got to watch this again, actually, and try and put myself in the shoes of a secondary teacher. As you were saying, there's so many ways in which this can be used. It can be used in drama, you know, so the pupils can actually then reenact a piece of Shakespeare themselves, silently.
Now, there is a commentary on the DVD that can be used, switched on or off. Would you advocate teachers perhaps making use of that?
I think, as with all resources, what the teacher needs to do is to look at it and decide what's most appropriate for the learning needs of their students. So you consider the learning objectives and the intended learning outcomes that you want to try and achieve for that particular class and make use of it where it's appropriate.
OK, well, thank you all very much. Angela, let's move on to your second choice of resource, and it's here on the table. It's the Teachit Interactive Pack for Key Stage 3. Now, what are in those folders? And again, why do you like it?
We have a series here based on the plays that are currently set for SATs. And each pack contains an interactive CD-ROM as well as hard copy version of the materials. There's a full text of the play available to use during shared reading and an interactive glossary as well. So it gives the teacher an opportunity to look at the text with an entire class without everybody with their heads in a book.
OK, well, thank you very much. Let's go back to Matthew, who's again at King's Langley Secondary School in Hertfordshire with Karen Bird and her Year 9 class.
The Collins Teachit Key Stage 3 Interactive Packs are customisable and updatable titles for the teaching of Shakespeare. With each one you get the full text of the play in question. Here we've got The Tempest, and you get it in hard copy format which you can photocopy. Each text contains a glossary and translation of key terms. You've got it at the bottom here of the hard copy. But the interactive version allows you to click on them and you get the definition coming up on the screen like that. Now, in the file, there are over 40 lesson plans that you can work from. And on the CD-ROM, for the whiteboard, there are lots of ICT activities that children can interact with, like this one here. This is where you have to put the characters into order of importance. Now, let's go and see if the Collins Teachit Interactive Packs can whip up a storm in Karen Bird's Year 9 class.
If you were stranded on an island and could choose one item from each category, what would you choose?
Well, we found a quiet moment. Can you tell us how you've been using the packs this morning?
Yes, I decided to use one of the worksheets that asks about living on a desert island. I gave them ingredients of the sorts of things that they'd need on that island, and they had to draw a map of the island and label it for me. And from there, what we did was we looked at some of the characters from The Tempest and asked if they were the sort of people that you'd want as an ideal island mate if you were stranded.
Ah, so if you're up to some kind of trickery, he'd be really useful to have.
What do you think of the packs?
I find them quite dry. I find that worksheet after worksheet can become a trifle boring, but I liked the fact that it was easily accessible. And the students did manage to do very well out of it, and they seemed to get a good deal of understanding out of it. I wasn't terribly impressed with the interactive ICT stuff that was on the disc that came with the pack. It was very short, very bland, and not really suitable for the kinds of things that I would want to be doing. However, there are some really good drama activities in there as well.
So your overall impression of the resource?
Not brilliant, but I can see its usefulness in some cases. I don't think I'll be using it that often myself.
OK, quite mixed opinions there. OK, thank you very much. And on that note, we'll go back to the studio.
Well, Angela, Karen, not such a fan of your second choice. What would you say to her comments?
You need to go to these resources with your students in mind. So they will need tweaking. There isn't anything that's off the peg, and you need to be able to pick and choose what's appropriate for your class.
Yeah.
I would also point out some of the interactive whiteboard activities.
Right, yes, we didn't see any of them.
No. Here's just an example of one, which in this case is a multiple choice activity. And if you had a form of interactive voting software within your class, you could ask the students to select which genre they think the play Romeo and Juliet is, and that would then be a stimulus for discussion as opposed to a start and finish point.
Well, Colin, what did you think?
Well, when I was going through this, the first sort of word that went through my head was, worksheets. A lot of them. And I have to admit, I'm not a big fan of worksheets, but then I looked on the CD-ROM and realised that those worksheets are available on there as Word documents. And this, I felt, was extremely important and a really, really good resource, because what it means is that teachers can actually produce bespoke worksheets.
Melanie, what did you think?
I mean, I think it's very tempting as a teacher to see this as a full bespoke pack, and I don't have to plan too much because it's already done for me. And I completely agree with Colin about the worksheets, and I too saw worksheets and thought the last thing I really want to see is Shakespeare by worksheet. But I think if they're used really, really carefully, as Angela said, with your pupils in mind and the learning outcomes that you want, I think this is a helpful resource.
Well, Angela, now let's move on to your third choice of resource, and this is part of the DCSF website, the standard site Improving the Teaching of Shakespeare. So, Angela, there are so many websites out there. What is it about this one that you like?
Okay, well, this is the home page. So when you first come to the site, this is what you see. There are a collection of teaching resources, but you'll see that there's a whole collection here on generic teaching approaches for students working throughout the secondary sector. So there are lots of materials for teachers to use, including stuff for students working below level 4. And we've also, this is my favourite part. The Globe have provided us with downloadable extracts from the performance of A Much Ado About Nothing, and some interviews with the actors and the director. And I've seen these used in class with students, and it's gone really well.
Well, it looks quite intriguing. What do the panel think? Melanie?
I think resources like the link to the Globe website, generally I'd use probably in the same way as the Teachit resource. Think carefully again about how I'm using it, which pupils I'm using it with. For me in this resource, it was the guidelines that I found most interesting, because I particularly like the emphasis on performance and the way that the objectives had been grouped specifically for teachers to enable them to focus on character, themes and imagery and language, and then performance.
Colin?
Well, I liked the emphasis on, as you said, on looking at pupils at below level 4, but also there's sort of not the opposite of that exactly, but also that there's something there for pupils who are gifted and talented as well, which I felt was quite important, that they have resources aimed at them. Coming to the downloads and the MP3 files, and I was sort of thinking about that in connection with Silent Shakespeare. It's the opposite, isn't it?
Yes.
That we have the words, but not you know, the imagery, if you like, the actual drama in front of you. And so I thought that would be again a fantastic resource for use in the classroom for producing dramas, listening to that for their own drama workshop.
Well, thank you all very much. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. But to recap, the 3 resources that we looked at are the BFI Silent Shakespeare DVD, Shakespeare Teachit KS3 Interactive Packs, published by Collins and Teachit, and the standard site, Improving the Teaching of Shakespeare, from the Department of Children's Schools and Families. For more information about the resources that we've discussed, go to our website. It's teachers.tv/resource review, or email us resourcereview@teachers.tv. A big thank you to our panel, to Angela, to Melanie and to Colin. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Resource Review. Bye-bye.